With 9 new machines added to my wife's and my antique sewing machine collection since the last video about it, we decided it was time for an update. First up, we have Hayley Mae, a 1928 rotary Franklin. At 101 years old, she's newly graduated from being merely vintage to the more prestigious antique classification. Hayley is a clone of a white model RF. The Franklin brand was made for Sears by the Domestic Sewing Machine Company. We rescued her from a dusty corner in an antique store for only $150, which was a real steal considering she was in near perfect condition, came in a beautiful bentwood case, and even had an original manual. Next we have Dolly, a 1914 vertical feed machine by Davis. While she sews and sews well, cosmetically she's in terrible condition. The shellac clear coat has alligatored, and much of her decals are worn down to expose the silver base of the decals. She's called a vertical feed because instead of having a dog feed under the needle plate like most machines, she has a finger that comes down with the needle to push down on the material and pull it to the rear. Quilters like it because it prevents different layers of fabric from slipping relative to each other. Hayley Mae is our 1956 Singer 319W, one of the most polarizing machines you'll find. Half of the people who use them claim they're one of the worst machines ever made because they're noisy, complicated to use, and about as attractive as a boat anchor. The rest think that they're not that noisy, fun to use, and look endearingly quaint. We like her because she's, well, bizarre. She's got odd thumb screws all over the place, both internal and changeable external stitch design cams, and really looks like no other machine on the planet. She looked great when we first got her, but quickly learned the reason for her low $100 price tag was that she was missing her entire light system, missing the carry handle, and several of those mysterious set screws. But thanks to eBay part sellers, we're happy to report that she's now complete. Here's a close-up of the internal cam controls. They're activated simply by raising them, whichever one you want. But what makes this interesting is that you can combine different stitches by raising more than one of the levers. In theory, you can raise all 5. What happens though is it tends to make the stitch so muddy it doesn't look so good. The manual recommends using no more than 3. This lever activates the follower finger for the style cams, and there are as many as 30 of these that you can get and interchange. And while she may not be the prettiest or quietest machine we've ever had, she still runs and is a lot of fun to use. This Saxonia model Vesta was made sometime in the 1920s. We can't pin the date down any better because the German L.O. Dietrich company that made her was a casualty of the Second World War, and practically none of its records survived. A half-size linear shuttle machine, she features many engineering enhancements that made her an instant success. We named her Roxy Mae. The Vesta is beautifully smooth, thanks in part to the fact that instead of regular spur gears where the teeth come straight out, this uses angled teeth which mesh and run much smoother. Here's a close-up of her central decal and her main brand logo, ruined a little bit, unfortunately, by the placement of an oil hole. Also dating to the 1920s, we named this beauty Victoria Mae to reflect her British heritage. She was made by the Vickers Company, the same one famous for making military equipment, and is a copy of the Frister and Rossmann you'll see towards the ends of this video. She's a well-made vibrating shuttle machine that still sews great. She runs beautifully and features some of the finest decals ever applied to a sewing machine. Next we have Hayley Mae, a real tragedy. She's an 1876 Howe, the same Howe that invented the modern sewing machine. When we got her, she was little more than a pile of rust. We had to soak her for 3 days in rust remover just to find out how bad things were, and they were pretty bad. She's locked up, the Japan finish on her cloth plate is completely gone, most of the mother of pearl inlays are gone, and worst of all, she's missing the unique and almost impossible to find Howe shuttle. In fact, they're so rare that just to find out what they look like, we had to Buy a second how. This one's Hayley Mae and dates to 1879. She's in much better condition and, more importantly, has her shuttle. Here's a close-up of the shuttle. It's very long and yet very thin for a boat shuttle of this type. The most interesting part, though, is this little hook at the end. A finger on the shuttle drive fits up in here, and that's what moves this back and forth. It's an interesting design because this little lip has to be tapered this way so that the thread, as it's drawn over, can come around it and then get pulled up to set the lock stitch. It's a very complicated shape for a boat shuttle, and I have to wonder why he went that way. When restored, these machines will make an interesting pair because the first one has the more elaborate artwork with 24 pieces of inlaid mother of pearl, while the second has a much simpler design. Madeline Mae is an 1883 Wheeler & Wilson 8, also called the New Family sewing machine. She's a very early rotary machine, though her bobbin looks more like two small frisbees pushed together more than they do modern bobbins. The most interesting feature of the Wheeler & Wilson 8 is the placement of the take-up arm, which instead of being at the front of the machine is way back here where the thread is. You can see its action here. Unfortunately, this machine is in such bad condition, with rust everywhere, paint chipped and worn out, and almost all the decals gone. It's going to be a top-to-bottom restoration. Lastly, we have Rachel Mae, one of the gems of our collection. She's a 1916 German machine made by the Pfister and Rossmann Company. Featuring some of the finest engineering of any machine, this vibrating shuttle beauty is a real dream to use. Cranking a Pfister and Rossmann is an interesting experience because it's a very early machine that uses ball bearings instead of the simpler journal bearing. It's creamy smooth. Many of these machines appear to be damaged or worn because the Berlin has been removed from the trademark decal. Actually, that was done on purpose because this is a German machine and many were produced and attempted to be sold in Britain during World War I. To make it more palatable, the Berlin decal was removed. They were still highly prized because they were so well made. The fine detail in the decals and the subtle coloring make this one of the most elegantly decorated machines ever made. And there you have the newest additions to our collection. To see all of them and read additional information and watch videos on each, please visit our main website at waynesthisthandthat.com. Thank you for watching, and we wish you good sewing.